house rules, please report on. If you want to leave, please leave friendly, what's like at all. No booing and jeering, and keep your discussions to a minimum. Ideally, not at all. Right. I'm extremely happy to be chairing Malaysian Nationals in my hometown. So, without further ado, let's invite the Prime Minister to start.
Yes. Oh. Yes. Yeah. Hello. Yes. Marriage is a painful investment. People give up their careers. They move away from their loved ones. They sacrifice friendships. With this amount of sacrifice, I at least deserve to know if happily will truly be forever. What is the stance coming from the side of opening government? Our stance is simple. Marriage is a lifelong, physically and emotionally charged affair, and to prepare, you must have the full information available to make A, the most meaning out of the relationship that you are currently in, but B, in order to have the most fulfilling marriage possible. So what is the policy coming from opening government? How would this device be used? So as the couple, we would use the device and we would make our decision solely based off it. If it suggests that our relationship is going to end, we will call off the marriage, we will decide what we want to do with the relationship, we will move forward from there. Two clarifications, however. Firstly, this machine is accurate. It's not going to be wrong. It will definitely give us the accurate results. Number two, this machine can only be used for this particular relationship and it can only be used once. So what are the standards that will govern this debate and how will we win this debate? We have to prove two things. Insofar as we can maximize individual happirness for both the people entering this relationship, but secondly, insofar as we can prove that the relationship that we will have, irregardless of the outcome and the decision of this machine, is a good one, we will win this debate. So the first thing, as the couple, what are my interests? So let's talk about who this couple are first. We are the reasonable couple. We entered a relationship and we are potentially entering a marriage under normal social conventions. Conventions that are guided under a couple of external factors. This can be Hollywood, this can be cultural factors, this can also be societal factors. While all of these three things are unique and different, they all point to one commonality, that the person you marry will be someone you will love forever, someone that you will stay with forever. But the second thing that all these things point towards is that your relationship and marriage will be as fulfilling as possible. What does this mean? It means you would have the most amount of happiness, but you would also just enjoy this relationship irregardless of the ups and downs. Reasonably, this suggests that this is what the couple wants. This is what the couple wants to gain from entering this marriage. This is the primary and the most basic goal of entering a marriage. It is the most important to me. The first benefit that this machine can do is that it just directly aligns with the most basic benefit that I would assume and want to gain from a marriage. Second argumentation, this is a necessity on the first level for individual happiness. Firstly, if the relationship is not going to work, here's a couple of things that I will do. I will not waste time trying to patch up that relationship. So what does this mean? In normal circumstances, when we are unsure if our relationship is going to work, we make compromises for a person. We throw aside some of our concerns if it means that they love us. We maybe sacrifice going on a vacation, getting a master's degree, getting a good job to keep them happy. If I know that this person will no longer be relevant to me in a certain amount of time, I will not waste my efforts on these things. I would not have made these sacrifices that have cost me. Maybe I would have gone and got all these benefits. I would have actively pursued this education. I would have actively pursued this job. Notice, side opposition has to uniquely deal with the context that people make this decision due to unpredictability and have to suffer serious harms that are associated with it. But the second thing, have a seat, is that if I don't have access to this machine, I am stuck in a relationship that will potentially not work once I have already committed to it. It means I have already entered a marriage. I may potentially have kids. I may have to potentially deal with the stigma that comes with divorce. These are all sorts of things that I, as an individual, do not want to deal with. And these are all the things that an individual would want to opt out of. But the second thing, how am I as an individual happy here? Anxiety within the relationship is taken out. So what does this mean? I know that this person will be there forever. So what does this mean? It means that all of the things that bother me about them, all of the things that we can potentially talk about, sensitive issues like finances, or maybe the concerns I have on potential family members, are things that I can talk about, are things that I can actively achieve, are things that I can work out with this person. It means that the depth of the relationship that I currently have is one that is further deeper. It is one where I can develop a further trust with this individual. It is one where I will not always be scared, wondering if I'm going to say the wrong thing and this person is going to leave me. This anxiety is significantly reduced. The comparative is that you may have people in the world of opposition that are potentially happy not knowing, but I think just knowing that your relationship is going to work and it's worth investing in is a comparative that opening government uniquely has that side opposition has to deal with. Before I move into my next argument, yes.
So why are the reasons people opt to marriage than in your own? What's so different than things like cohabitation, for example?
You will not divorce. That is why you will opt into marriage. Thank you very much. So let's move into the second part. Let's talk about the resolution. Some relationships are going to fall apart, and I think that's inevitable. But think about it. In both worlds, a relationship meant to fail will fail. In both worlds, you would have to deal with that emotional fallout. The difference in the world of opening government is that you have an expiration date. So you can actively make the preparation for when the breakup happens. You can figure out if you have a place to live. You can get rent money available. You can talk to your parents to get the emotional support available and needed in order to cope to that breakup. So comparatively, in the world of opposition, you would not have time to prepare for that mental and emotional anguish. In a side of opposition, you would have to go through all that emotional trauma and all the trauma of the relationship breaking down in your face, as compared to just being able to take these concrete steps to solve it. It's 6:45. Let's start wrapping up. What do I have ownership over in this debate? I have explained three things. A, the individual level of happiness is attained under the world of opening government because we are able to know. B, relationships are better in our world because we eliminate anxiety. And C, we can also just prepare for the fallout that comes with it. We have also proven that just the after fallout of this relationship is one that will not be mitigatable. Any material that comes beyond this point is derivative of this. For all those reasons, let's make informed decisions.
I thank the Prime Minister for that speech. Now I call upon the leader of opposition. You have the floor. Here.
What's the main objective of us entering into relationships? We feel like oftentimes we understand that there is no proper guide to love. There is no handbook to life, to love, and all of these things, but we still do it anyways. We think that that's what makes us human. We realize that oftentimes we have to make trade-offs, but because of our limited time here, we also understand that we need to make it work sometimes, or maybe just risk it all. But there's still value in pain in itself. And we feel that oftentimes that's exactly why people enter into marriages anyway, that there is still some value into going and experiencing that kind of human experience. And we think that that's what OG is oftentimes limiting people from accessing to the fullest value. Because we understand that the value isn't just derived from the highs, it is also derived from the lows. Because as humans, we should constantly evolve and change, and we accept that. And we think we celebrate that. And we think that that's the only way that people can gain these kind of things if people let and enter into relationships organically, especially when they don't limit themselves because of all this fear and preparation that OG wanted to talk about. That oftentimes we enter into marriages also knowing full well that there is good things and there are also bad things, and we take it anyways because we know that we can learn. But we feel that when what OG is suggesting in general is hampering with the objective, we think that that's when you should not be taking this particular mission. Dealing with side OG, sit down, Naveen, is that first of all, they say that apparently it's not more better for people to, let's say, see this, take this machine and suddenly realize that maybe I don't want to enter into these marriages. Knowing that at the same time, there's still some value also in that particular marriage. Even if it means if it's only 2 years, you can literally live and gain experiences that you can never gain with your parents, with your friends, because this is the person that you love the most. And the ability, the initial intent to even enter the marriage and you taking that machine already showcases to you that there is intent to further invest in this relationship at the end of the day. And we'll tell you why that even if, in a sense, when you take this machine and people still think that it's optimistic, I'll be spending 5 good years, but because of the inherent idea of you knowing that there is an expiration date, that will still kill the optimism that is so pure in the first place, we think that is detrimental. But before that, sure.
So the value that you describe in relationships are non-exclusive and can still happen in open love. The difference is that we can prepare for the end of that relationship. How is that comparatively less preferable?
Okay, I'll be dealing with that later. But first of all, let's just talk about you saying that apparently we enter into relationships knowing that you need to have an informed decision, for example. But we think that, sure, information is knowledge and all of this is very valuable. But at the end of the day, this information isn't even absolute, because you only know as to when it will end, but you do not know why it will end. And we think that this vital missing link of this information is the one thing that causes detriment to all the benefits that you wanted to talk about. Also, this actively making preparation thing. We think this is the exact thing that I wanted to talk about. That you making preparations oftentimes hampers your ability to enjoy the relationship. You limit yourself from loving this space even more, because you know the more love I give to this person, it will hurt me even more than after 2 years, he will eventually leave me or something like that. You make these preparations, and the second you start making these preparations, we'll move further and further away from this person, hampering your main objective of you even entering into that relationship as a whole, right? That love, the love that Naveen often talks about, oftentimes, I feel like it's often just like more of like cohabitation. And then, but if people enter into marriages realizing that is a part of this societal structure that we have caused, that we have made, that encourages things such as development, things such as the existence of a new life, for example, all of these things can only be gained under our side, right? But let's analyze. What am I going to tell you about? Number one, why exactly do people marry? And second, what are the views that people have of marriage in the society now? And then how does this then harm the marriage or the relationship in general? I'm not thinking anymore, I mean, I'm sorry. Why do people marry? I feel like people marry still in this society is when you love someone enough that you want to take it to the next level. The fact that you already want to go ahead with this person already showcases to you that marriage oftentimes is a form of security, that you are interested enough in this person, especially in a world like where we already celebrate things such as hookups, for example, right? We regret the narrative of things such as death do us part. In fact, we also realize society now is quite aware of these things. We allow for things such as like divorces, we understand people can opt out. In fact, we even allow things such as prenups, for example, where people still knowing that the possibility of but the ability for you to know when it does, we think that that's quite harmful. How does this then harm the marriage and relationship in general? We enter into a relationship, a marriage, knowing the possibility that it can end, but not at the event that it does. Number one, the kind of harm that you make is that this machine doesn't tell us why, and it only tells the time. This is harmful. You'll spend every day agonizing as to what could exactly be the trigger, especially when the scale is so terrible. Could he die in these 2 years? Could he cheat with me on his secretary, with his secretary? All of these things are the kind of things that we constantly do. And the more you think about it, and the more you do your preparations, like I don't know, trying to move out and all those kinds of things, you will hamper the ability for you to develop this relationship even more, right? The fact that you will always be paranoid means the ability for you to nitpick on the smallest things, and also that, or maybe some people who are optimistic and deem that, okay, because we only have 2 years, I'm gonna plan these 2 years in general, but because life in itself is quite unexpected, there will always be something that comes in and triggers something, and you will take everything as some kind of like, oh, this is bad juju, this is where it ends. So even to the possibility where it can end the relationship even even earlier in the sense, because you cannot stand the general paranoia, you cannot stand the general the general neuroticness of your relationship in general. Like, it means limiting ability for you to do things like, I don't know, maybe going on an island trip because you're afraid that he might die, or not letting him go out with his friends because you don't know all these things. All these things can actively hamper your relationship. Second, you are unable to make long-term decisions. We think that that's also harmful. For example, things like having kids. Maybe your relationship is only for 3 years, but some people literally enter into marriages because they base off their happiness from having kids, and they want to have kids, and marriage is a form of security that enables that I will have a system to fall back onto the second this child is in this world. But now people have to sacrifice this particular metric of happiness just because they think, oh, I'm gonna leave, like we're gonna break up and this is terrible for this child. Also limiting the ability for new life to enter, this life that can definitely bring new forms of happiness. Anyways, plus a child is forever, your husband may not be. And then the fact that it will also hamper your ability if you have a child, that the second that the child knows that it'll only be 3 years, but you took the gamble, anyways, the child will blame you. You and dad bicker all the time, mom, and I hate it. Why did you even bring me into this world? The fact that you not only lost a husband, but you already are losing a child that is forever yours and will be yours, we think that that's harmful. That just because a marriage ended, your relationship with that child is also hampered, we think that that's regrettable. Notice, inside OO, we are the ones who actually maximize the ability for people to gain these forms of happiness. We feel like probably not knowing sometimes is the best thing possible.
I thank the leader of opposition for that speech. To defend the case from the side of the government, I call on the Deputy Prime Minister.
I'm not a boy. Note that pain isn't a mutually exclusive thing in this debate. But what is mutually exclusive is your ability to prepare for that pain, is your ability for you to realize that there are things that you can do in your relationship, knowing that the expiration date is coming forward, knowing that the expiration date is somewhere in a foreseeable future. That is the distinction in this debate. Before I talk about how you maximize relationship structures, you allow people to delve further into each other, and that is what the more plausible kind of relationship you're going to see is in opening government's world, not the nitpicky version that's coming up from opening opposition. I have one quick recharacterization of this debate, because I think we've heard a funky characterization from opening opposition. The characterization is that society is very aware right now that we know that relationships are going to end, there's going to be a lot of divorces, therefore people are signing up prenuptial agreements, and etc. Maybe this is true that we're becoming increasingly aware, but given the characterization that Navin gave you, the society tells you that you should be in a long-lasting relationship, that long-lasting relationships are very, very good. You should opt into marriage because that's meaningful, that's what is going to define your life, having kids, having families. That is the overarching narrative that this debate functions in. That means the likelihood of a person opting into a marriage without realizing that I can opt for a prenup, without exploring all the likelihoods of whether or not my relationship will end, is less likely under their world. What's going to happen is people are going to opt into a relationship with blind trust, assuming that there will be a forever in this relationship, when there really will never be a forever, in a likelihood where the love machine tells you that that's not the likely scenario. The next thing is also this idea about nitpicking thing, right? Like, so they suggest that in relationships, people are going to be far more nitpicky of each other, going to be going to assign and put blame onto each other far more, knowing that they're going to be the cause of that relationship. They're going to be the cause of the demise of that relationship. Note that that is compared with the benefit in opening government of working through that in the relationship, knowing that no one is actually to be blamed for anything because there is just an end to this relationship, that perhaps there is a reasonable conclusion to be drawn, saying that there is just no further compatibility, that we're just going to wear out of each other, and that's perhaps okay. Perhaps you are going to wear out each other. Perhaps there is no ability for me to continue finding utility in you, and that right now, in that definite end, that is the process where I want to just engage and find the most happiness. That means that you deal with those issues better. That means you know that you're not going to be nitpicky because there's no reason to be nitpicky, because you know there is a definite end. You're only nitpicky if you're going to assign you can say that you are the reason tomorrow we're going to break up. You are the reason at the end of this week I'm never going to be able to deal with you anymore. All of that is contingent upon the unpredictability of the end of that relationship. Therefore, I don't think people are going to be nitpicky. Argumentation on why you maximize the happiness that you get within this relationship. No, thank you. There's a quick permutation that we have to talk about really quickly, because I think that's why we're assuming a lot of scenarios. Let's assume that the machine says that there's going to be a long-lasting relationship, that you will have a really, really long-lasting relationship. In a likely scenario in the world that we live in, society tells you that long relationships are good. You're going to find a lot of happiness. Having a long-lasting partner is a good thing because you generally show a lot of commitment and you're a great person. This means you will end up marrying that person. As an individual in this relationship who is a victim of the societal narrative that you should be in a long-lasting relationship, that's where you find the most personal utility. Because you've lived your whole life being indoctrinated, being told that being in a long-lasting relationship is the only meaningful relationship to you, only to, in opening opposition's world, opt into a marriage that perhaps will end in 1 year. That means you can never consent to all the shaming you're going to get in opening opposition's world. When you have a short-term relationship and you go back to your family and they say, oh, your marriage only lasted 1 year, is it? Those kinds of narrative and shame that you have to deal with throughout your entire life is something you could never consent to under their world, but you can under our world. You can't opt out the relationship. You can never subject yourself to that specific type of humiliation that society says you should experience. That is important in our world. In a world where the relationship, the love machine says it won't last long, you can opt out the relationship under our world. But let's assume that also the machine says that you are going to be in a relationship forever. There's also a lot of romanticization of living a lifelong, getting into a lifelong relationship and finding your one true love. And often this is contingent upon trying to be as averse to harms, just having a divorce in general. I never want to break up a family. I never want to be called the moral culprit of a family breaking down in of itself. The reason why a child is abandoned in the future. The reason why my child will never be able to afford a maternal structure and a paternal structure simultaneously. Assuming the couple is heterosexual, of course. Yeah, in that kind of world, you will never be able to be averse to the kind of humiliation or to blame yourself and be that moral culprit of the transaction. We'd rather stay averse. We tell people, if you will feel this humiliation, if you're indoctrinated to feel that way, you have the ability and agency to opt out. Why you maximize the experience of that relationship? I'll take one from closing.
I have a question. If the love machine is accurate, how do you opt out?
This is before the transaction of the marriage. If it says it's not going to last very long, you don't want a long marriage, you say, thank you very much, Saftikal, I'm going to the next person. Otherwise, live a life of solitude, even more preferable. Experience in relationship. Nowadays version of this, and I had no response on the alleviation of anxiety in relationships. The flip is also true about exploring a person, never fearing that person's judgment. Note that in this relationship, you're never going to be able to say that the reason why I told my partner this very insecure thing about myself is the reason why tomorrow my partner will leave me and I will have to live with that blame forever. Note that just because you are going to decide to get married doesn't mean you already are very honest with each other. You know the ins and outs of each other and you are very, very honest with each other. Note that sometimes there's information asymmetry in opting into a relationship, and that warrants a lot of doubting of each other or not knowing when my partner will like me or not. For example, if you are bisexual person who had a gay partner before and you're opting into a head now, you are not sure whether you want to tell your partner that you had a girlfriend if you're a girl, because you don't know whether your partner will be okay with that or not. But you really, really love your partner and you want to be in that relationship. In that world, you can tell your partner things like this because you know the definite reason why, the definite point where the relationship is going to break is not like immediately after I tell you that it's in the foreseeable future. I can delve into each other a lot more. You understand the in and out of your partner. The outcome of this is very simple. Oftentimes in that relationship, you rely on another person to say the right things in the right moments. When you turn for emotional support, when you turn for your partner to say the right things, oftentimes they know that they should give you space because you learn that this person has anxiety. You learn that this person does not like it when you hound them a lot more. That process of getting to know each other is incredibly expedited in opening government's world because you have the ability and security to know that this is not the reason my partner is going to leave me. If this debate is very simply about an arbitration about whether people can have better relationships, we win that in opening government. If this debate is about whether or not I can opt out of humiliation and specific adverse effects to me because I never want to experience that, opening government takes this debate.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that speech. To wrap up the opening debate, I call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Testing, cool. In the words of the postmodern philosopher Miley Cyrus, it's not about the problems that you have, it's not about what's waiting on the other side, it's the climb. We tell you, panel, that marriage is not a means to an end. Marriage is a process upon which you improve as a person together. We think it's problematic that side government wants to argue this debate in a world where marriage is just that. It's a contract that you enter and that's it. Then you get out, there's no attachment at all. We think in a world where you choose to enter because you love each other, therefore, you need to take into factor the connections that they have and what that connection can evolve to during, before, during, and after the relationship. And also, they need to also take into consideration that pain isn't necessarily good. That pain is necessarily a good thing. Pain isn't the horrible action and horrible act that exists on government. We tell you pain allows you to evolve. I will extend Osila's argumentation on how exactly we allow people to evolve through pain. But before I enter, sure, why not? Let's not value marriage on the short-term scale upon which you would make ever. But second, this also explains why exactly it comes in the long term. But we tell you the versus my argumentation. We tell you that in this debate, this debate live in this debate is function in context, that side of things that is into their the instinct to mobilize into a world where according to their characterization, after they have this machine, no one cares about their force. No one cares about how long your relationship ends. No one forces you to live forever because that's what the machine says. And as long as you don't tell the rest of society what it says, I think there's no problem within that. The stigma of marriage, the stigma of divorce, the stigma of a short-term marriage, therefore you. Therefore, the entire half of Puki's argumentation about how exactly people are shamed, people are attacked by society, condemned, all doesn't happen because we are literally arguing in the context that they are setting. We are being the generous ones here. Second argument, second response. Because we also need to answer the question of what exactly does this marriage look like and how does that anxiety happen? Because Sila already told you, when people enter into marriage, they enter into marriage for the security that it provides, the security that you do not get the moment you fear every single action or any single trigger that might happen. The moment where you realize when is the end of the marriage and the beginning of the cohabitation upon which we wait to finally divorce. Because there must be a time when that starts to happen. The time when you start to realize, yeah, this marriage is expiring soon, but when's the actual start of that expiration date? When is exactly the beginning of the end? That is the fear. That is the nuance that we think they have missed. The moment you start to realize, what's the cause of my divorce? There must be a cause. There must be a reason upon which you don't want any of this. And it's extremely problematic because divorce isn't a one-time process. It's a culmination of all the events that you go through. No, maybe CG. It's a culmination of all the processes that you live in. You don't get divorced even for those petty reasons, for, I don't know, someone not cleaning up their plate once. But someone not cleaning up their plate for every single meal, for every single day, for every single month and every year is what leads to that trigger, is what leads to that paranoia, because you start to fear what causes everything else. Before I move on, finally, to the argument at Alexander Silla, where I'll tell you why exactly relationships are dependent on the work that you put in. There's always a bumpy road, and you always will need to amend that. Deals directly with the argumentation coming from OG. Sure, closing.
So, and approach. Not even the analysis as to why those pain are considered of less magnitude than the pains of not enjoying the relationship.
Sorry, can you repeat that again? The mic's not clear.
Okay, so pain is gonna exist in a world in which the relationship ends, which is gonna end eventually. You have to give us reason as to why those pain will be of lesser magnitude than the pain of not enjoying them.
Yeah, so here's where I deal directly with why that pain is good. We tell you, panel, that failure can be great, that the real ending of a relationship can be wonderful, that if you have no pain, then you have no gain. We tell you that in our world, in the world where you choose not to get married, you'll always have an incentive to openly communicate and talk about your problems and your concerns. This means any single issue of miscommunication, there's an incentive for you to talk to them, because the threat of divorce, the threat of breakups has always existed. This means you'll always have an incentive to try to improve yourself. You always have the incentive to not allow this marriage to stagnate just because you think it'll end in like a few years, therefore there's no reason for me to do so. This is why we tell you that pain is important, because that pain means that you are more willing to go to therapy. That pain means you are more willing to change yourself in order to appease your partner, in order to make sure that you can learn how to love her again. We tell you that on our side of the house, on their side of the house, you never have that. What you have is people waiting out the inevitable divorce. What you have is people just saying, it's gonna happen anyway, I might as well suffer this anyway. And that's why Calvin's POI was extremely important. In a world where you're forced to stay, and because the machine's always right, you literally force a person to endure the pain that they have. This means if you're supposed to get married for 60 years, and within the 5 years, you really, really hate yourself, then you force themselves, and if people have no measure to opt out of. But what does that pain lead to what does that pain lead then? Because we tell you that this then means there's no incentive to self-inspect and communicate with each other. Because once you're divorced, time's up. Not because I realize I might have a personality issue, not because I might realize I'm a toxic person, but just because. Let me tell you, sometimes divorce can be a wonderful thing. That is the catalyst that makes the beginning of the rest of your life. That's why you need to realize that you might be a problematic person. That's why we went on our side of the house, where you're forced to deal with that. You're forced to learn and improve on who you are. This means learning to change who you are. This means opening up to new expectations and experiences. That's why we tell you that certain people change drastically the moment they get divorced. That's why certain people need that failure to ensure that they can succeed later in life. Because that can only happen if you introspect the moment a relationship ends. That can only happen if the moment a relationship ends and you have that pain and you learn from that pain. The comparative then is in their world, because they never go through that pain. They have no reason to learn. They have no reason to change. They harm the next person you're with. They harm the friends that you are once you get divorced. You have no reason to be a better person. Proud Throwers.
I thank the Deputy Opposition for that speech. To open the closing part, I'd like to call on the member of Parliament. We have
Test, test. Test. Can everyone hear me? Okay, thanks. Divorces are worse when people didn't expect it to happen. Divorces are worse when the subtle cracks that led to that divorce were not predictable or things that people never thought would happen to them. This side of the house does not protect people, specifically women, who are often the most disproportionately affected by the institution that is marriage and the entrapment that societies provide them. I want to talk about three things in my speech. What is marriage like, and why is this machine absolutely necessary? Secondly, who does this machine empower? And lastly, I just want to talk about how people act with regards to marriage once they know that there's an end to that marriage. Because it was only asserted by side opposition that essentially when you know the end of that marriage, suddenly you can no longer enjoy each other's company, suddenly you have no longer value for that pain, and so on and so forth. Before I move on, just one or two things that don't necessarily fit in. All asserted that, all essentially, if you look at your notes, all of their harms only exist if people end up not going through with the marriage to begin with. They never provide any structural reasons as to why that is likely. But not only that, number two, the reason why people now may or may not act into going through these marriages is not something that we have to necessarily defend, in the sense that we don't have to say this means they enter or this means they don't enter. The bottom line is that they have a choice to choose between the two. Understand that the motion is very clearly worded, that essentially couples going into a marriage now making this decision get to use this machine to decide whether or not it comes to an end. So you can opt out before you go into those 60 years, as in, because you can realize maybe I don't want to be married that long, and all those considerations before you enter into marriage that previously otherwise would not have existed now come into your rational calculus. That means more opportunity for you to think about whether or not you want to make this investment. All of the further rebuttals will be integrated. First, substantive. What is marriage truly like? Why do we think this machine is absolutely necessary? We think in the way that society works, marriage is an institution that essentially entraps people, but most typically women. It is most coercive on them because they are often told to depend, no thank you, on a husband. Often children, little girls are told to aspire to marriage and not education, told that they are burdened, so therefore go to your husband so that they will provide for you forever. All of these things are coercive factors within society that already push women to go into those marriages, not only without information, but even if they don't want to. So oftentimes there is huge pressure put onto them, and there is huge stigma if they say no or if they say they don't want to. Now at least there is a definitive proof that they can also use to say that this will not last forever, my husband will not take care of me forever. That means I have more of an incentive to argue that essentially I do want a job, that essentially I don't want kids because one day my kids will suffer from divorces and so on and so forth. That means all of these things, these women are now able to at least be exposed to, even if you want to argue that they are not able to completely get the full extent of the benefits of. Not only that, often it means that the narrative, also like narrative around marriage is completely overrated, right? Because once people enter into marriage because of the value of pain. I'm sorry, to what end? Can you necessarily educate how much pain is too much pain for a person? Because essentially it could be things from being ignored by your partner, and that is a form of an emotional abuse. Or the idea that essentially you could go into a loveless marriage. You don't know. But at least knowing that at the end of that there will be an end to this marriage means that you also get to decide whether or not you would want to endure any of those unpredictable possibilities for that period of time. That means you have more opportunities to think of that. No. But also, I'm sorry, this will not be derivative from OG, because OG told you you will be more prepared, but they didn't necessarily analyze anyway, right? I will tell you what knowing the date of your marriage ending will do is that it tells you how much you have to put into that relationship. Oftentimes, individuals get subsumed into relationships. Oftentimes, individuals get subsumed into marriages where they get and they are subjugated either their husband's identity or they are known as an entity and no longer as individuals. Understanding that there is an end to that marriage means that you have an incentive to continuously maintain your own individual identity within that relationship, because you know that at the end of the day, you have no one else to depend on but yourself. No thank you. This means that you empower all of those women who necessarily feel that marriage is the only way to have that security. Because essentially, if it means that less people opt to do marriages that they don't want, we're completely fine with that. Also, it means putting in less sacrifices into relationships because you know that one day those sacrifices will be futile. We're completely fine with that. If that means that there's less pain in the relationship, because never told you why there is value to pain, other than this idea that you get to grow or whatever, right? All those things are unrealistic expectations about how people should handle relationships and how they should handle marriages. We think people should be able to know exactly what they want to put into relationships. Second, substantive, and this is where I go into specifically who does this machine empower. Number one, I think it empowers people, like Obo said, may have anxieties. I think people have anxieties all the time before a marriage happens, before the wedding ceremony takes place. A lot of people have cold feet. This just means that this is an argument either for or against whether or not they want to enter into that marriage that doesn't last forever, or whether or not they want to enter into that marriage that does last forever. Oh, yeah, before 6.
So, if the machine is accurate and coupled of doesn't that mean that the expiry date shown by the machine is the same date?
Huh? No. It means that you opt out before entering into that marriage. That marriage will last for how long the machine says it will last, right? That's the expiration date to that marriage. Like, I don't know why this is so confusing. Next, right? It also means that at that point in time where you have cold feet, at that point in time where you have anxiety before you enter into marriage, that means essentially now that you get to look at past sacrifices that you've made as well. I'm now engaged. Do I think all of these sacrifices will be worthwhile if it's only going to last for 5 years, right? All of these things women get to decide also, right? Let's move on to essentially why I think that this will help poor women and most importantly women in developing nations the most. Developing countries. Especially when you talk about societies where women are pressured into marriages even more. When you talk about the current societal pressures that exist and are exerted onto them, often they are told that you don't have to look for a job because your husband will look after you forever, or all of these other forms of decisions that are forced upon them. If they are able to essentially have that piece of information that tells them that this marriage will not last forever, and essentially they do not have to be within these, or if they have the idea that this marriage will end prematurely or like before they expected it will last longer, that means they have that security of knowing they have a job, they have education, and so on and so forth, not having kids. But ultimately, remember that this debate cannot just be won based on the idea of preparation and pain and so on and so forth. It's if you are sacrificing your own identity when you go into marriage, you get to decide if the length of time that marriage will last is worthwhile. Go inside, closing comment.
I thank the member of government for that speech. Now I'd like to invite the member of opposition. You have the floor, Lydia.
So a lot of times, your interactions with another human being is often the most important thing in your life. Your interactions with your family, your parents, your wife, your husband, these are all things that matter to you to the extent that often you trade off other things, right? You tell them that I would sacrifice my education for you. I would sacrifice X for you. And this is because inherently human beings find more utility in their interactions with other human beings than often the utility that they find in their interactions with their career, in their interactions with the various other things that they might do. Now, in my speech, I'm going to talk about why, or what makes a relationship worthwhile, and why these individuals want that interaction with another human being, and that's where they gain the most amount of utility, and what changes on their side. And finally, why this loss of utility on when you can't get into that interaction that you wanted is likely to be worse than the utility that is lost
when the relationship abruptly ends, basically to answer Ashin's question. But a couple of clarifications. The first, the frame of the debate. So the info slide says that the love machine will measure the relationship accurately, which means often you can't opt out of the relationship. The logical deduction of it is that the relationship will happen because the love machine is accurate. The info slide is biblical, infallible. So if they opt out then technically the opt-out date that's provided to you would be the date that you chose to end or opt out in and of itself, right? Which means the loss that you claim to have averted through all this opting out is unlikely to exist because it would have been on that day in itself. So a lot of the benefits of opting out is unlikely to materialize in opening government and closing government. Number two, obviously they have another frame. Let's engage with that frame as well. So even if you can opt out, I think the first thing that needs to be acknowledged is that you often won't get the chance to enjoy something that you really wanted to embark upon, and you convince yourself that you will not enjoy those things, right? But additionally, our harms that apply, even if you still opt in, will still apply, right? So I think now I'll explain why the relationships that you opt into will not be worthwhile. So what makes a relationship worthwhile? It's, and I know this is cliche, the little things, right? Often things like celebrating anniversaries, buying flowers for your spouse, gift giving, like doing special things for your children, and doing special things for each other. And you do this often because you expect some reciprocity of love. You expect them to reciprocate that feeling to you, right? You think that they will likely be there for you a couple of years from now. They will likely do good things for you later. And this also means that they do this because they marry because they want these things, right? These are presumably people who have been in a relationship for a while and are choosing to get married. Therefore, they value these things at a point over the things like your master's or your career in finance. And you want to maximize the utility of this major life decision of yours. No, thank you. So what changes on their side? Couple of things. The first is you become passive in your relationship. Again, you do think these things, these little things that make a relationship worthwhile, that make your miniature interactions on a day-to-day basis worthwhile, because you want some reciprocity of love. But if you know the relationship is ending, it's coming to an end, why would you do those same things anymore? Why would you want to embark upon those same decisions of buying flowers when you can expect that that reciprocity is less likely to exist? You are likely to try less. And you aren't necessarily to be angry, but you just try less and the relationship becomes a bit dead. And this is increasingly true as you come closer and closer to the date of that relationship ending, right? It's particularly problematic if it's for quite a long time. Number two, you plan the relationship in the exact way the opening government talks about. You want to check about your finance, you want to talk about your children, you want to talk about your career. And what do these interactions look like? You worry about things like separate checking accounts. You worry about things like who has the most amount of money, are the monies balanced, who earns more, who's contributing more to the relationship. You spend your time on your masters in your relationship more than you spend your time with your partner, right? And that applies to the man and applies to the woman, or applies to the man and the man as well, right? And additionally, you do things like you talk about custody, right, of children. Who should get custody of their child at these points in time? Now, what do these interactions look like? Because on top of being passive in your relationship, you are also talking about things that often make each other uncomfortable, that sort of challenge your insecurities of the person, that make you trust the other person less, that they're constantly going to be fighting for their own interests, that they're not going to care about you as much. Thank you. Third thing you do is you cheat, right? Because at the point which you know your relationship is ending, you plan for your next partner. At the point which you know that your partner is not going to be there for the rest of the time, and you invest yourself in wanting to form better relationships, so on and so forth. The same way how you plan a pension because you know you're retiring at 55 and you invest in the future, you plan for another partner. And this often involves to a lot of affairs and relationships and makes it a lot more toxic in nature. Number four is you become paranoid. And it's not just because maybe cheating happens, right? It's that you are constantly worried about why the affair ends. Did they cheat? Will they beat me at the end? Will they try to make their life a lot more uncomfortable for me? So the conclusion of this is there is a massive trust deficit within that relationship. Yes, I think opening actually.
So the machine will be able to predict if your partner will like a passive partner and then based a success.
Sorry, I can't.
So the machine will predict and suggest that if you are passive, your partner will be like it. That's why your relationship is successful. How is that a bad thing?
Why would the machine predict your partner is passive? Sorry, I don't understand your. It's okay. You can ask Wesley that. So, why is this loss of utility worse? Why is this loss of utility greater than the loss of utility if the relationship ends abruptly? For a couple of reasons. The first is presumably this marriage was very important to you. Meaning, again, your interactions with other human beings because you wanted to get married is very important to you. And you choose to not be able to engage in this relationship in the way that gives you the most amount of utility. And presumably that's more than the utility that's lost on things that don't matter to you as much, right? Your masters, your career, and so on and so forth. The second is that often the abrupt ending often involves a month of grief or 2 months of grief. But this is in comparison to constant and prolonged grief of being in an unfulfilling relationship during the entire time, right? You just don't enjoy each other's company when you wanted to be in a relationship that allows you to maximize your utility and maximize each other's love to each other, right? And I think if this means that the length of time that you are sad is greater than the length of time that you are sad when the relationship ends, that you can presumably prep for, like in the way opening opposition suggests, the loss of utility is greater, and we're very, very happy to accept it.
I thank the member of opposition for that speech. To wrap up the case from government, I call on the government to be fair.
When people don't know when the relationship is gonna end, what most likely going to happen is they ignore a lot of different things, cracks that are in that relationship. The difference on our side is a situation in which once those cracks start to appear and it's appearing toward the end of that relationship, you automatically know the end is near. This is the only time you can have a better discussion about the terms of how the marriages end. That's number one. But number two is knowing about the fact that your marriage is gonna end at some point means the kind of discussion you have before the marriage essentially changes forever. In the sense that one, you have better discussion as to the number of kids you wanna have or if you're gonna have any kid at all. Understand that on OO, every harms they bring to us is essentially dependent on the fact that people wouldn't opt into this relationship. We think people can still opt into this relationship. But secondly is that if they opt out of this marriage, it doesn't necessarily mean they can't opt into another kind of marriage and attain the utility of that marriage. There are three things I'm going to do in my speech. First, I'm going to talk about why CO is out of this debate. Second, I'm going to take OO out. And lastly, I'm going to differentiate us from OG. Let's talk about CO. So, the first thing Kelvin wants to do really was to misconstrue the debate in the sense that these people can't really opt out of this relationship. I don't think that's the case, because understand that this debate exists in a world in which they're yet to marry, but they're making the decision to marry or not. We think this machine essentially gives them the ability to make a choice whether to marry or not. So the reason they're probably going to be married is because they think the utility of the marriage is something they actually cherish. And you feel like this relationship is not going to last that long and the utility is not going to be worthwhile. That's when they have incentive to find another partner and actually go into another forms of marriage. But secondly, they want to talk about utility of marriage. We do not think utility of marriage is something that's exclusive to their side. Given that one, this machine essentially, or the existence of those knowledge doesn't mean you can't opt into other relationships or you can't opt out. But secondly, if you decide to go into those relationships, it also means you're better prepared for future relationship you might want to opt into. But thirdly, is also that the problem and the lack of expectation that comes from your previous relationship doesn't extend into future relationship that you up to, a problem that will forever exist on their side, which is why the pain is even worse. Secondly, they want to talk about paranoia and like why it exists. The first thing is, I'm going to pose it to you, is that paranoia doesn't necessarily exist for a couple of reasons. The first reason is the reason paranoia exists in most relationships is the lack of knowledge of what your partner is doing and the suspicion of what they are doing. We think this suspicion goes away significantly the moment in which you know, like, okay, if he's behaving wayward, it's toward the end of the relationship, and this relationship is gonna be over anyways. As opposed to your word in which you do not expect it, and all this track are things you're probably gonna ignore. And if you do not ignore it, that paranoia is probably what's gonna lead to the end of the relationship, and that end is just going to be very, very painful. Then Calvin wants to tell us that the pain that exists is just a pain that's going to exist just for 1 month, and that pain is just comparatively less significant than the one on our comparatively less significant. I think that's not true, given that one, when things happen unexpectedly, one of those things that happen is the fact that the person you're breaking up with or the person you're getting divorced from is a person you probably have already thought you spend the rest of your life with, a person who does things that you would never expect or things you feel like you would never have done to them. The kind of pain that exists affects you on a different on a different spectrum. The first thing is the length of time with which you suffer from those kind of things is very, very long. That is to say, it prevents you from, like, it essentially imbibing you an issue of trust issue that prevents you from going into other relationships. It also means a situation in which every other relationship in which you're up to, your previous relationship is always going to be a question mark, which makes your future relationship essentially very, very bad. We think the pain that comes as a result of that is just significantly harder, as opposed to a pain that comes with you not enjoying the relationship like OO wants to posit to us. The reason for that is you not enjoying the relationship only lasts for as long as that relationship lasts. And the moment in which you opt into other relationship, you are probably get the utility of those relationships. So on the idea of pain, we think we reduce significantly more pain on our side than on their side. That's before I go to OO, I'd like to take closing.
So your opening says that people in status quo just assume their relationship lasts forever. But you say that people won't know when the relationship will end, and therefore that creates paranoia. So which is it?
So this debate assumes that the machine will tell you when the relationship ends, and you are able to plan according to the result that the machine gives you. So we'll start this debate assuming this debate is about what couple should do as opposed to what's in the best interest of couple. I do not know how stupid a couple would have to be to consider pain as something that would be inherently valuable to them, or something that they would have to subject themselves into to become a better individual. But let's kind of engage with them first. The first thing they ignore is the fact that this relationship are going to end. On what term does it end? We think it ends on a better term on sites closing government, in a world in which you actually know that this relationship is essentially gonna end. It gives you the ability to prepare for to do a couple of things. One, the choice exists, like Barney told you, that you can either decide not to go into this relationship or even opt into to go into this relationship or not. The very existence of that choice is something that's beneficial. But secondly, how much you put into this relationship becomes a factor. That is to say, what do you sacrifice? Do you have to sacrifice your career, or you have to sacrifice other things that you wouldn't normally sacrifice for a person who might not love you as much as you do? But also thirdly, she talked about the fact that a lot of people who suffer from anxiety and COVID, who are afraid to go into relationship, essentially will find a lot of solace in this kind of things. But they want to tell us that these individuals will not be able to enjoy their relationship, or will not be able to enjoy their marriage. I don't think that's true for a couple of reasons. One, it's asserted on their side. But the second thing is, if you know the end of the relationship, what most likely is, and you love this person, what most likely is you want to maximize the benefit of the time you are actually using with them, or you are spending with them. But secondly, they want to tell us that you have to develop this relationship and ensure that this relationship becomes something good, and your inability to make long-term decision is something that's harmful. One is, with regard to the relationship, you don't have to make any kind of long-term decision, because any long-term decision you make would essentially go into fertility. You have kids, those kids are not going to be with their parent. But the second thing is, other long-term decisions you can make with regard to your individual self, with regard to your career, are much better, because now you can factor those things as opposed to trade them off on their side. The pain that exists on their side of the house is just significantly harder, because it's a pain you have to live with for the rest of your life. The pain that exists on our side is probably a pain that would be there for as long as you're in that relationship, because you don't enjoy it. But we do not think that's never ever going to exist. We're extremely proud to propose.
Yeah.
I think the government will to end the grand finals of Malaysian Nationals 2018, called on the last Speaker of the House, the opposition whip. You have the floor. Maybe.
Betul siapa ni? Oh, good. So, housekeeping, and also slight tutorial in maybe framing. So, what do we know about this debate? Info slide suggests to us, motion suggests to us that we know two things. That number one, the machine is really accurate. Number two, this is a couple, it's an actor debate. It happens before marriage. So, what can we conclude by this? We think there's an inherent contradiction between having an accurate machine and being able to opt out of it, right? And being able to like prematurely opt out of something that has already been predetermined to you and it's really accurate, right? So we think the only way to reconcile the contradiction that is rife in the government bench is to say that if the scenario is if the machine is accurate and the couple opts out, it means the expiry date shown by the machine is the same day as the opting out happens, right? And for those who don't opt out, which will be maybe a lot of people, there'll be some date in the future, maybe 10, 20 years down the road, doesn't really matter if you, and the date is the same even if you don't find out from the machine, which is the opposite. Sure.
That means that even if the relationship will still continue to exist, then you do not have to enter into an institution of marriage. Can you please respond to that?
Yeah, sure. So even if you don't enter into the institution of marriage, there's still a lot of harms that exist from being in that relationship. There's still like a lot of stuff that happens within a relationship that doesn't have to come from the institution of marriage, right? It's fine, not much of a difference. Yeah, let's deal with CO first, right? Bunny came out in the extension and told us that, guys, this debate is important because you empower people. Who do you empower? You empower people with anxiety, right? You empower also women, especially women in developing countries. So first thing is that it's an actor debate, right? It's for this couple, what this couple wants. So in the actor's best interest, I'm not sure why a couple cares about this thing. In fact, I don't really are, right? And the second thing is, I think these people are like locked in until those expiry dates, married or not married. The difference is the partner has no incentive to do things to prevent the partner from leaving, right? The partner doesn't feel ending the relationship at a point in which they know it will end only in 10 years in the future. What does this mean? This means for these people who are in relationships where maybe malicious partners, it's always worse for them. Your partner stops trying his hard to please you, maybe your wife stops having sex with you, maybe your husband stops buying maybe gifts for you. It's worse for them, it's less fulfilling. Let's talk about OG then, right? They talk about how it's marriage, physical, emotional investment, relationships too. You should have full information before you go to consent. I think sit down, guys. Like if ending, so I think ending the marriage or relationship with the knowledge of the machine is not something you can claim as an inherent contradiction. on having an accurate expiry date and having the free will to end it prematurely. That means you also cannot claim that there will be no sacrifices will be made to keep the relationship because the relationship just cannot be ended prematurely. There's no free will in this, guys. Then I tell you, oh, guys, they'll be happy because there'll be no anxiety, right? Because they know the partner will be there forever. They know like the partner will be there like for a period of time. Okay, sure. You may be happy because let's face it, right? Like if you know the relationship will end only in like 10 years time, you know you can do whatever the fuck you want, right? Because like your partner will just stay until the expiry date, right? So that means you make abusive behaviors like being cold, cheating, like things that Calvin has told you otherwise, like a lot more prevalent, right? Because they're emboldened by the knowledge that the partner won't leave them. They are predestined to stay until that day, right? So I don't think, so sure, for these people, they'll be very happy, but I don't think the partner will be very happy when both find out they can do whatever they want. I don't think this relationship is very fulfilling. Let's talk about consent, but like if you don't consent, then the relation, then the expiry date will just be the same. I don't think that's particularly important. So let's talk about where does that leave us, right? Where does this debate leave us? So I think the end comparative is this, right? The question is which relationship is better? We think the most impactful debate that we can have, right, today is what happens between when the couple gets married or stays in the relationship in both worlds, right? Because like both worlds, maybe the relationship will end in 10 years. We think one world, but the difference is that one world knows it will end. So in that world, God's world, they suggest you can prepare for relationships. People get less anxious about ending. We don't think anxiety with relationship is a big problem. We think anxiety is part and parcel of relationship, right? We think it's often symmetrical, this uncertainty between partners, right? But we think it's often what motivates like good behavior within relationships, the giving of gifts, the saying of compliments, the saying of I love you, and stuff like that. So having some level of anxiety about the relationship, propels a partner to behavior that prevents the relationship from ending. I think this keeps the relationship a fulfilling one. Then CG tells you that you try to maximize your utility from the relationship in your work. But no, if you know there's a date in which the relationship automatically dies, there's automatically less incentive for you to try harder to keep it. You don't fear it ending. But if you're uncertain, you always try. So what we've proven to you from CO and what makes us the most important team in the debate is that in the relationship where you know what date it ends, where you know that one day, on this specific day, it will end, it becomes less fulfilling, less happy, both parties have less incentive to try to please the other party more. It's more likely to be harmful. We think it's preferable to have a relationship end abruptly because we think the grief of breaking up, the process of moving on is always much shorter than the grief and the sadness and the pain that comes from having an unfulfilling relationship in which you cannot prematurely opt out. I'm very proud of you.
I thank all speakers for the debate. Please come to the floor, shake hands. Thank you very much.